Tryouts might be the most hectic and nerve-wracking time in the season because your entire next calendar year is determined by a few short hours of trying out in front of coaches and staff. It can be even more nerve-wracking than maybe a normal game because a mistake might feel a little bit heavier because you feel like every time you make a mistake, you might not make the team. Even though tryouts are so difficult, there are some things that you can do to give yourself the best chance to make the team and get your best game out of yourself while you're trying out. While it may be easy to focus on this added pressure and the nerves that go along with it, the key to succeeding in tryouts is really mental discipline in the form of focusing on controlling what you can control. There are a lot of things outside of us that we can focus on, like the nerves, like the pressure, like the outcomes we may be getting on the ice, whether they be good or bad. But the key to excelling in tryouts and giving yourself the best chance to make the team by getting the best game out of yourself is mental discipline. But before we can get into the mental side of things, we have to go through the physical side of excelling in tryouts. The first way that you can stand out in tryouts is obviously by being in great shape. I've helped coaches select teams. I've been at tryouts where coaches are looking at players for their team. And one of the things that coaches always say, or one of the most consistent things that coaches say is, well, I'm considering this player for my team, but I might not take them because I don't think they're in very good shape. And whether it's fair or not, coaches will make a snap judgment of you as a player based on your level of conditioning at tryouts. Because when they see a player who's out of shape, they're not just looking at that player as being out of shape physically on the ice. They view your level of conditioning and your readiness for the tryout in the physical sense as your level of commitment to the game of whatever sport you may play. So if they see a player who's in shape and a player who's ready physically for tryouts, they'll heavily consider that player for their team because they view that player as being committed even when they're not practicing or playing their sport. Whereas if you show up out of shape, they feel like, this player maybe focuses when they're at practice or when they're playing a game, but they're not committed to it full time. They're not committed to it outside of the game when they're away from the field or the rink or whatever it may be. And so they want players on their team who are in shape because to them it's a culture thing, right? If a player is in shape, they view that player as being committed all the time, and they want players who are committed all the time on their team. Because when things get tough over the course of the season, it's the players who are committed that are going to be able to push through and get out of the valleys of the season and make the team a good team. If you have a culture of players on your team who are committed, obviously you're going to have a more successful team. So when they see a player who's out of shape and not ready, they think, that player may not be the best in our locker room because they're not committed to their sport. They're not committed to what they do. So being in shape, showing up, being physically ready to tryouts is an important thing because coaches will make a snap judgment of you as a player purely based on your level of conditioning and your level of being physically ready for tryouts. The second thing you can do to excel in tryouts is another obvious one, and it's work hard. So obviously when you're asked to do a hard lap, when you're asked to run sprints, when you're asked to give 100% on a drill, maybe it's there's some sort of battle going on, like a really tough drill, a physically demanding drill where it's you versus another player. Obviously, you want to give 100% on these and show your level of compete. You want to showcase your level of compete and your work ethic because obviously, again, that's another culture thing. Coaches see that as someone who's going to bring good culture to their team, and good team culture results in winning, and that's what most coaches want. Now, obviously, they want to develop players too, and that's their job. But for most coaches, they're worried about winning, and so they want players on their team who are going to help them win, and players who are going to work hard during practice, during games, no matter what, are the ones that are going to help teams win. So, working hard isn't just physically giving your all. Body language has a lot to do with working hard too. So, when something good happens, when something bad, maybe you make a mistake, or maybe you're resting in between reps, don't have a negative body language. Have your shoulders up, be alert, be ready for when it's your turn to go again. Usually in tryouts, you're not going every rep, obviously, just like you wouldn't in practice. So when you're resting, when you're watching other players go, be alert, be focused, be intent, and be ready to go when it's your turn. When coach is at the board talking, or he's showing players, a certain scheme or a certain drill, Be alert. Look at the coach. When they're talking, nod your head so that they know that you're listening, right? Listen with intent so that you can do the drill right the first time when it's your turn to go. Body language is a really important key because coaches notice it. Negative body language is very easy to point out, and it's very easy to see. So when you show negative body language, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb in a bad way. When you show positive body language, the coach will know that the coach will feel like they can have confidence in you because you're alert, you're ready, you're focused. And again, those are all things. People who are dialed in every time they're at practice and every time they're playing a game are the people that coaches want on their team, right? Because people who are like that contribute, and they contribute to long-term success throughout the season. Okay, now to get into the mental side of things. The next thing you can do to stand out in tryouts is to stop comparing yourself to other players. I've been through this. I think everybody's been through this. When you're in a tryout situation, it's very easy to compare yourself to somebody else. It's very easy to compare yourself to the results they may be getting in the drill, or maybe you're doing a scrimmage and they make a great play and you feel like you haven't made a great play in a while. And you think that the coaches are seeing that, and now you're thinking, I don't know if I can make the team over this player. Don't do that, because all it does is take away from your focus of what you need to do. If you're focused on what everybody else is doing in tryouts, you're not going to play your best game, right? Because you're thinking too much. And also, you don't have an accurate representation of that player's tryout just from the few reps that you've watched. You're not going to see every rep. You're not going to see every time they make a mistake, and you're not going to see every great play they make. So maybe you only happen to see the times when they're making great plays, and you miss the other few mistakes that they make. So whatever representation of that player you have in your mind isn't going to be right. So it's not worth having. It's not worth even trying to figure out if they're having a better tryout than you, or if the coaches like them better than you, because once again, you have no idea what the coaches are thinking. The coaches may not like that player. They may think that player's lazy. They may think that player doesn't really care. Whereas you're here, you're working hard, you have good body language. The coach may like you better, but you won't know until tryouts are over. So you don't want to compare yourself to other players, because it's going to take you off your focus. You're going to be thinking too much, and you're not even going to have an accurate representation of how that player's tryout is going in the first place. So focus on your game. Focus on what you're doing, okay? And that leads us to the next way you can stand out in tryouts. Another way that you can have your best tryout and give yourself the best chance of making a team is to let mistakes go. Now, mistakes are never fun. In games, you feel the pressure of the mistake. You feel like you let your team down sometimes. But in tryouts, it can be a little bit more difficult to deal with, because you feel like every mistake is going to keep you from making that team, and that is not the case at all. If you make a mistake, the best thing you can do is let it go right away. And if you make another one, let that one go right away. It's easy to make a mistake and then wonder what the coaches think about that mistake you just made. If they're like, oh man, I don't know if I want that player on my team anymore after you make a mistake. You can't do that, because again, you're going to down spiral and you're not going to be playing your best game. You're going to be thinking about that past mistake, and you're not ready for the next play. Also, you don't know what coaches are thinking after you make a mistake. They may not have seen that as a big mistake, or they may see it as an opportunity for you to bounce back and make a better play the next time. Because over the course of a season, every single player in sports, in every league, is going to make mistakes. The good players, the great players, they make mistakes too. But the difference is that they're able to bounce back from them right away, so they minimize the damage of a mistake. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but you want to be the player that bounces back from that really well. And making a mistake can be an opportunity to showcase that to coaches throughout the tryout. So they may see your mistake, but a lot of times the coaches don't want players that don't make mistakes, right? Because that's impossible. Everybody makes mistakes. They want the players who can bounce back from the mistakes the best on their team. And that's what they're looking for. So if you're able to frame it the right way, you can use that mistake to make the tryout better for you if you're willing to move forward and let that mistake go and show that you can bounce back from adversity and bounce back from a mistake really well. Because again, when coaches are looking at players for tryouts, they want long-term culture, right? They don't want the player who's just going to be good now. They want the player who's going to be good over the span of months, because that's how long seasons are. That's how long a season is. So they want the players who can make mistakes, who can handle adversity, and who can bounce back and keep going forward. And you want to showcase that in your tryout. Another important key to being your best in tryouts is to not try too hard. And what I mean by this is to not try more than you usually do in practices and games. If you're competitive, you're going to be working pretty darn hard and trying pretty darn hard to do your best every practice or game. But sometimes in tryouts, you want to make the team so bad that you put extra pressure on yourself and you're trying extra hard to make plays, right? And once you start trying extra hard to make plays, you get yourself off your game because you're not letting yourself just trust your instincts, right? You've done the training. You've been in practices, you've been in games. You've done the work away from the field or away from the ice or away from the court, whatever it is, hopefully, right? You've been putting in consistent work. So once you start trying too hard, you take that work and you kind of diminish it a little bit because you're not trusting that. You're even though it's from a good place, you can end up hurting yourself because you are thinking about how bad you want to make the team and how hard you think you have to try to make plays. And once you start doing that, you're gonna get away from your game. You're gonna try to make too many plays, and you're gonna end up making mistakes. And then now you have to deal with those, let them go, like we talked about earlier. But then you're gonna take yourself away from your game, and you're gonna take yourself away from the training that you've done, because now you're in a different mindset than you were when you did all your training. So don't think you have to try harder to be better in tryouts. Yes, you should compete. Yes, you should want to make the team. But once you're out there, let it all go. Quiet the mind and just play your game. Don't feel like you have to put in extra effort to make plays, because you have the ability to make plays. You've done the training for it. So you kind of mentally block yourself when you're trying too hard and you're over trying to make plays and you're almost trying harder than you normally do. You're going to get yourself out of position. Another great point to remember going into a tryout situation is just to trust your game. It's kind of similar to the last point, but I wanted to make it a point by itself because I really wanted to emphasize the fact that once you're in a tryout or even in a game situation, all of the thinking just needs to go out the door. Just trust your game. Again, you've done the work. Hopefully, you've done the work away from the game. You've worked hard in practice every day. You've worked hard every game. You've strived to get better every single day that you're in practice and you're playing games and you're training. And because you've done that, now it's time to just trust it. You've done that all for a reason, and it's all going to pay off. But you have to go into that tryout with full confidence, and you have to fill your mind with confident thoughts going into that, so that once you're in the tryout, you're not thinking, you're just trusting yourself. You're trusting your instincts. When you're playing on instincts, all the training that you've done and all the training that's stored inside your subconscious is going to come out, and it's going to come through. You just have to trust that, okay? I've been through a lot of tryouts. I've been through a lot of good games, bad games. The thing that I always find to be the most important for consistent performance, it seems, is to just trust yourself, trust the training. And that's why it's so important to do the work leading up to tryouts and to do the work every practice and every game, compete as hard as you can, right? So that when you're in a situation like this where you need to play your best, you know that you have it, you know that you've done the work, and then you have something to trust. You have something to lean on. If you don't feel like you've been working your hardest, or you know that you've been cutting corners somewhere, now it's going to be harder to carry that mindset into tryouts. So trust your game, trust your training, and go out there and just play and let yourself be in the flow state. Let yourself be focused. Don't try super hard to get focused, because the more you try to force focus, the more it's going to go away from you. And it's going to be harder to get focused, because now you're thinking about how you can't get focused even though you're trying so hard to. Okay, so just go out there, trust your instincts, let your instincts take over, and have fun. If you have fun, you're going to rely on your instincts and you're going to play your best game. Obviously, growing up playing hockey, I've been in a lot of different tryout situations at all kinds of different levels. But one of the best, probably the best piece of advice I've ever received for tryouts came from one of my coaches who played in the NHL for many years. And I remember being nervous before a tryout, and I asked him if I should focus on a certain type of thing that we had been working on leading up to the tryout. And I'm incredibly nervous, and I was hoping that he would give me an answer that would take my nerves away, right? Obviously, when we care about things, we're going to be nervous. So I asked him, what should I focus on to have my best game and to have my best tryout? And he smiled and he said, nope, don't think, just play. And what he meant was, I've done the training, I've done the work, I've put in my full effort to this. Now it's time to go out there and just play and trust it and let it take over. If you try to force your best game, you're not going to have it. If you go out there and you're ready to play and you're mentally calm and you're physically ready, your best game will take over. Let it take over. So go out there, don't think, just play. Get yourself in good shape leading up to tryouts. Have good body language. Work hard when coach asks you to do something. Don't compare yourself to others. Let your mistakes go and trust your game. If you're out there having fun in a situation like that, you're going to play your best game, and playing your best game is what's going to get you on the team. And if you'd like to know more about how to play your best in tryouts and excel in a tryout setting, we've written an article on it. I'll put the link to that article in the description below. What are some ways that you prepare best for tryouts, and what are some pointers that have helped you have your best tryout in the past? Put those in the comments below, and thank you so much. Go out there, have fun, and trust your game.